In this video, we're going to look at how major sports teams manage to exploit their monopoly power and use that power to help with new stadiums get built, put pressure on the local governments to allow or to help them finance it. So for over 100 years, North American sports leagues have limited the number of teams to increase both competitive balance and profits. As early as the 1930s, there's demographic changes and falling transportation costs that put pressure on Major League Baseball to expand. Now, the Great Depression and World War II delayed a lot of these moves, but after the war, both Major League Baseball and the NFL placed more teams on the West Coast, but they didn't increase the number of teams. So previously, most of the teams were located on the East Coast, but they moved some of them to the West Coast. Now, Major League Baseball seemed content to respond to demographic pressures by rearranging the franchises until it took its first big systematic expansion by a professional sports league in 1961. And this was direct response from Congress. Now, in response to a lot of this, they would expand and they'd bring on more teams, put them in more in areas that were not predominantly white. So you have the Brooklyn Dodgers, the Giants, Washington Senators, and so forth. Now, if you look specifically at the National Football League, the NFL, a lot of their expansions came under duress. So with Major League Baseball, they did get challenged with their monopoly power during these expansions, and the NFL did get this as well, but to a kind of a larger extent. And so the NFL and AFL, who were going to merge, they recognized that their impending merger would violate the antitrust laws and requested a limited exemption that would allow them to merge. Now, there are two powerful legislators that were kind of standing in their way, and they were in areas that would have been negatively impacted for them. Okay. These were two that were located in New Orleans. And because of that, the NFL, in a strategic move, was able to kind of bypass the pushback from Congress by agreeing to put one of their teams in New Orleans. Okay. And so once they passed legislation that allowed the NFL and AFL the right to merge, the NFL approved the creation of the New Orleans Saints. So that's how the Saints came to be. Now, in addition to teams exploiting their monopoly power, cities will sometimes contribute by committing themselves to these franchises without any actual guarantee by them. And so what has happened in the past is cities will agree to finance a new stadium, but then the team sometimes will back out and use that as more leverage. And so it's been going on for a while, and because these teams have a lot of monopoly power, they're able to use that to their advantage since you have a lot of cities competing against each other. Now, in more recent years, the past couple decades, a lot of these leagues have actually reduced their monopoly power by creating too many teams. Now, the NFL has placed itself in the opposite situation because they have not expanded since 2002, whereas other leagues have added teams. Now, leagues can also limit their monopoly powers by locating franchise in an unbalanced manner. So, for example, the Australian Football League, 9 are in Melbourne out of the 18, with the 10th in nearby Greenlawn. Now, the fans of the Western Bulldogs might be upset if the team threatens to move to Canberra, but Melbourne itself wouldn't hurt. be hurt. And so, these are ways that's a way that they can hurt themselves. So now let's look at it from if it's worth it to build it. So how does a city decide how much a team, stadium, an event is even worth? Now they could look at objectively, as an economist would, and look at the net present value, which is a way to look at the amount that a stream of future benefits would compare to costs that they would incur today. So before we look at that, there's a couple of assumptions. We're assuming that the cost to build the stadiums are to the city at least, are at the moment the stadium opens. Okay, this is just for simplicity. And then we'll assume that the revenue that the city receives comes from annual lump sums. And also, we are assuming that cities will know how much revenue they're going to receive. Now, this is not the case. Now, these three assumptions are not the case, but just for simplicity, we're going to assume that. Right? So, under these assumptions, if the city believes the benefits it will receive at time t, which is b, for each of the t years after the stadium is built, it is what is willing to pay the price v, where v is the value of the stream of returns. Okay. Now, $1 today is not worth as much as $1. $1 tomorrow is not worth as much as $1 today. $1 a week from now is not worth $1 from today, and so forth. So you need to discount that, okay, because you have inflation. So if the city expects to bring in, the benefit to be 50 million each year, that 50 million is going to be worth less and less over time. So you need to discount that. Right. So a couple terms here. Present value of $1 today that we have t years is 1 plus r to the t. Okay. So the present value is 1 divided by 1 plus r to the t, where r is just some value that you expect money to change by over time. Okay. So the present value, so the value today, so you want to put everything in today's dollars. Okay. So you compare apples to apples. The present value of a stream of benefits to the city then becomes, right, so this is the value to the city. All right. So in the cost, it's the value. The benefit in year 1 divided by 1 plus r. Okay, again, so that accounts for the change in the value of money. Benefit in year 2 plus 1 plus r squared. 3 and so forth. Okay, so those are the present value of the benefits. So it's the benefits in each year while adjusting for that different value of $1. So based on this, the project is profitable as the value you expect to receive is greater than the cost. Okay, so again, we're assuming that all the costs are incurred right away, so you don't need to discount that. And it's not profitable if the costs are greater than the value. Now, when it comes to these calculations, there's a lot of subjectivity, and it might not reflect the how the city's residents feel about it and so forth. Right. Now, the contingent method, CVM, says that one good way to determine how much the city's residents are willing to pay is just to ask them. But then you get into the issue of survey bias, sample bias, and it can be a problem getting a good representative of how the actual citizens feel. Okay. So those are just a couple ways that teams exploit their monopoly power and the way that cities look at the costs and benefits of having a new stadium.